Caroline, do you think that Miami got this one right?
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. John Eric Sullivan, the new general manager in Miami, he is a Packers lifer. He has been with the Green Bay organization since he was an intern, cutting clips and running around and, serving coffee. So it makes sense that John Eric Sullivan would go back to the Green Bay well and hire somebody in his first hiring, coaching hire of his GM tenure would go back to the well to somebody that he's incredibly familiar with. I view coaching hires very similar to like presidential elections. Like you always want what you didn't have. You want the opposite of what you just moved on from. You go from a Republican to a Democrat, Republican, Democrat. You just want to switch up with what you've just experienced. Well, Jeff Hafley is like the antithesis of Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel, offensive mastermind. Jeff Hafley, defensive guy. Mike McDaniel, very eccentric personality. Jeff Hafley, very boring football guy. And I say boring guy, I don't mean that in a bad way. Sometimes boring football coaches are a very refreshing and good thing. So I think that it makes a lot of sense that is the direction with which the Dolphins would want to go. Did they get it right? It's fair to look back at some of the experience that we do have of Jeff Hafley as a head coach. It's not the perfect comparison because he was in college. He was the head coach at Boston College, had a losing record at Boston College. Is that a Jeff Hafley issue or is that a Boston College issue? I kind of lean it's the latter. It's a really difficult place to coach. It's a really difficult place to win. You're competing in the ACC against the Florida States, the Miamis of the Clemsons of the world. It's really difficult to recruit to Boston. So I don't think that's a perfect, thing to point to and say, well, Jeff Hafley can't do it because he didn't do it in college. I think you kind of throw that out a little bit. I'm intrigued to see how this goes. I think a defensive mind is a really interesting fit in the AFC East.
Look, I think you're right too. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there was a lot of conversation about maybe the locker room not always showing up for Mike McDaniel the right way, and there were a lot of conversations about it. So I understand bringing in somebody that's very different from that. I just think we need to couch a little of this conversation around where the success lied. In fact, if you go back, and I'll credit wearegreenbay.com, had a great article about the changes in the Packers defense from pre-Micah injury to post-Micah injury. And, for anyone that didn't see this, in the 13 games that Parsons played this season, the Packers had 34 sacks, 61 tackles for loss, and 84 quarterback hits. Those are remarkable numbers. In the 3 games without them after that point, Green Bay didn't register a single sack. They had 7 tackles for loss and only 11 quarterback hits. So I understand that losing Micah Parsons is significant, but when we talk about Hafley's success as a defensive coordinator in Green Bay, it is fair to at least look at the fact that they had one of the best players in the world and they were successful. They didn't have one of the best players in the world and they weren't as successful. And I'm not trying to question everything about a head coach based on his area of expertise, but I do think you have to look at Miami and say, okay, do they have a Micah Parsons? No, they do not. So for me, what you have is a certainly a very qualified coach that's well respected across the league. But I'm looking at it and saying your production drop off without your best player was staggering. I have no idea what your offensive identity is going to be. I don't know who you're bringing in as an offensive coordinator. I still don't know what your path is that you're going to have to an actual quarterback to figure out what's going on with Tua, or if you're going to try and fix that relationship. We have no idea how some of the other talent in the locker room is going to react. It's too early to know. I just think this is a very maybe hire to me. Like I want it to work out for the Dolphins. I want it to work out for Hafley. I want everybody to be particularly happy. I just don't know what actual evidence, what flags we are planting and saying, here are the concrete reasons that we believe this will fix the Miami Dolphins. They got their guy, but I just think this is a very time will tell sort of moment to me. And that's not the only coaching hire we got last night. I want to get your thoughts on Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh has gone from being the defensive coordinator of the 49ers to now being the head football coach of the Tennessee Titans. In fairness, this is a team I always like to make sure people know our backgrounds a little bit. We both covered the Titans at different points in our career. We both lived in Nashville for a very long time. We are really familiar with this organization. So the Titans finalized this deal for Robert Saleh. How do you feel about it?
I love this for the Titans. I am shocked Robert Saleh took this job. because Robert Saleh has already had to suffer through being the head coach of a dysfunctional organization. It's not very often that you get two cracks at the apple at being a head coach in the NFL. It's even way more rare to get three cracks at it. So for Robert Saleh to get another opportunity and to go to an organization that is dysfunctional ownership, dysfunctional leadership, has fired someone every single year for the last 5 years was shocking to me. But I had Robert Saleh go into the Baltimore Ravens because I thought Robert Saleh was one of the best coaching candidates on the market, and the Ravens were one of the best openings in this cycle. So I think the Titans got one of the best coaching candidates on the market. And the reason why I think it's very smart for the Titans for a few ways. The Titans are barren of talent on their roster. What Robert Saleh has shown that he's been able to do with the 49ers is to just work with what he's had. He hasn't had Fred Warner and hasn't had Nick Bosa for a large portion of this season. Yet still, the 49ers were still able to play good defense and stay in games. Now, look, you have to have some Jimmies and Joes at some point. You give up 40-plus points to the Seattle Seahawks. Not a great look for that defense. But I still think for a large portion of this season, this defense was able to stay together even without their two best players. Robert Saleh has a history of being able to work with what he's had. He's going to have to do that in Tennessee. The other thing I think that is a good thing for the Titans is that Robert Saleh does have head coaching experience. Similar to the Dolphins, they went with the opposite of what they just fired. Well, the Titans are going with a guy who's defensive-minded. Brian Callahan, their former head coach, that was a total and epic disaster, was an offensive mind. And Brian Callahan had zero head coaching experience, had not in any experience calling plays at all. He didn't call plays in Cincinnati. Zach Taylor called plays in Cincinnati. So what Robert Saleh has is experience as a head coach and experience failing as a head coach. Maybe that's important. Maybe you have to learn what not to do as a head coach to then learn what to do as a head coach. And I think the third thing is, and I thought it would be an offensive guy hired in Tennessee to work with Cam Ward. I think it's an interesting perspective from a defensive coordinator because the only person that knows quarterbacks better than an offensive guy is a defensive guy. Defensive coaches want to have a quarterback that they hate to game plan against. Maybe Robert Saleh looks at what Cam Ward is able to do and says, I don't want to have to coach against that, so I want to coach that.
Yeah, I think obviously Cam Ward and the evaluation that Saleh had on Cam Ward had to be important because I don't think he would, to your point, go to a dysfunctional organization if he didn't believe in the quarterback. And it's fair to say the Titans are dysfunctional. The legend of Robert Saleh so far is better than the actual version of Robert Saleh. And yes, that defense was absolutely lights out. We talked about it this year with all the injuries. I think he's done a really nice job as the defensive coordinator. I just want to remind everybody, he was 20-36 as the Jets head coach. And even go deeper on that. 4-13 his first year, then 7-10, 7-10, 2-3, and fired. So you're talking about somebody that was never even remotely competitive with the Jets. And this is where you say, well, it's the Jets and they're a terrible organization. I'm not sure the Jets are any worse an organization top to bottom than the Titans are. This is where you say, well, the Jets never had a quarterback. Robert Saleh was in charge of the organization when they took Zach Wilson number 2 overall. So I need to know, again, I'm going to be that guy that says, what was your sales pitch? What was your interview for how you're going to develop your quarterback? Because there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that Robert Saleh can coordinate a defense. There's no doubt in my mind that the Titans are going to be immediately a better football team because they have a better head football coach. And I do believe that Robert Saleh is going to be able to make the most. Jeffrey Simmons and a Robert Saleh defense, inject that in my veins. I'm excited for that. What's his plan for development on Cam Ward? Because otherwise, if you bring in somebody that's absolutely electric on the defensive side of the ball, but you don't properly develop Cam Ward, you're going to end up wasting a first overall pick in the draft. And as you and I both love to say, like, franchises fail quarterbacks more than quarterbacks fail franchises. What is Robert Saleh's actual plan to not fail Cam Ward? Because season 1 of Cam Ward had some ups, had some real downs. I'm not sure anybody really knows how good he is yet as a quarterback. So I'm nervous, even though I love Saleh in thought, and I love the brand of Saleh, and I love the job he's done as a defensive coordinator. I'm nervous about this for the Titans and what it means for the future of the quarterback position specifically.
And I think that's why the offensive coordinator hire is going to be absolutely mission critical for any of these defensive minded head coaches that are taking over some of these jobs, like the Dolphins. The offensive coordinator is going to now be tasked with figuring out what the heck to do with the quarterback position in Miami. Same thing with the Titans. And I said it is so critical for the Titans to get this hire right at the head coaching position because you don't get very many opportunities to unruin a quarterback. And that's kind of what Brian Callahan tried his hardest to ruin Cam Ward. So what Robert Saleh now needs to find is the guy to develop Cam Ward. There's been a lot of reports, a lot of rumors, some rumblings that Robert Saleh would bring in Mike McDaniel if he was hired as a head coach somewhere. So Mike McDaniel, I know, is going to be interviewing for head coaching positions elsewhere. If he doesn't get a head coaching position elsewhere, I think that would be a great fit. Mike McDaniel, the offensive genius with Cam Ward, and then Mike McDaniel kind of gets an opportunity to, I didn't want to say repair his reputation because I don't think his reputation was tarnished in Miami, but I do think it can be beneficial for head coaches that were fired to take a step back and be a coordinator and kind of rejuvenate their image a little bit. So if Robert Saleh is able to land Mike McDaniel as an OC, I think that's a slam dunk.
Yeah, look, whoever lands Mike McDaniel as an OC, should they do that, suddenly we view that entire hire differently. You are 1,000% right about that.
Totally.
So with those two names off the board, we only have a few openings left. Who's the biggest name left to you? The guy that is going to be most coveted?
I think it's Clint Kubiak, and he kind of follows that model of young, up and coming coordinator to kind of take that next leap. So I think that you're going to start to see Clint Kubiak's name hover around the Bills job, hover around the Ravens job. I thought Clint Kubiak with the Raiders would be a fascinating match. So I think that Clint Kubiak now becomes like the hottest guy that doesn't have a date to the prom.
Yeah, I think you're right. Although, go back and check it out on YouTube. We just talked to John Feliciano, and now I'm all in on Dragon. Like, look, when your nickname's Dragon, like Davis
Dragon.
Webb, when your nickname's Dragon Webb, I want the Raiders to have Dragon Webb as
Yeah,
my head coach. So, look, I'm all
that
in
is
on
awesome.
some of these offensive minds, particularly when you look at the jobs that are going to be remaining open. It's just so much of it about who's going to develop a quarterback. Like all of us that watched the national championship last night, the number of tweets you've seen from smart people that have said, "Hey, this is much of this is going to be about how he's developed." I think you're going to have to make sure you have the right people in place to actually develop somebody like Fernando Mendoza.